In this video, we're going to start walking you through the properties that are found within the light mapping window, which I've already got open but was sitting off camera. Now, we're going to start off with the first of the three panels within the light mapping window being the object panel. There are two critical things you should know about this panel. One, it's context sensitive, so what you find within it is going to change based on what you have selected. But the other thing, the more important thing, is that what it's showing you is really just object properties that are relevant specifically to light mapping from that object. So for starters, if we select, just say this yellow cube back here in the background, you see the types of properties we have available. Now what do we have here?
Well, the very first one that you see is a static checkbox. This is going to denote whether or not this object is static or not, and if it is static, then it will be calculated when a light map is baked. If it's not, it will not show up in your light map.
That's right. The name of it doesn't really say so, but the idea here is you're only baking light maps for static objects. And it makes sense. If an object isn't static, then it would be considered something that may move or change in some way as the game progresses. If you have light maps that you've baked out for a box such as this, and at some point in the game the box moves, if you've baked light maps for it, the shadow and the lighting information from that box will remain behind, which looks odd. So if you want your object to be considered for a light map, it needs to be static.
Right.
Now down from here we have the scale in light map and the atlas. Now, in a nutshell, what are these settings going to do for us?
Well, the scale in light map is a scaling factor, though, when the light map is being baked and it's calculating out how much UV space to allocate per object, will allow you to increase or decrease in proportion how much of that object is going to take in that particular light map.
So it's kind of a resolution tweak.
Sort of.
Okay.
It will. The reason I say sort of is because there is actually a resolution setting, but that is a global resolution. This will actually figure out how much of that object's going to take of that particular light map.
A kind of object-dependent resolution tweak.
Exactly.
Now down from here we have the atlas settings for the light map. These are going to allow us to change this particular object's positioning and tiling within the light map texture itself, as well as which light map this object is listening to.
Right. By default, the Beast engine, or light mapping, when you hit bake, is going to calculate all this automatically for you. So what it will do is it'll figure out how much space these objects should take on a light map. It'll figure out how many light maps it's actually going to take to be able to represent these with the attributes that you've set, how its scale and light map, its resolution, and it will plot all these out for you, and then it will assign that object to a light map index, meaning which map it's going to be set up to, and it will also set where in that light map it resides, hence the offsets, and how much of that particular light map it's using, which is the tiling.
Gotcha. So generally speaking, these are already going to be set for you. Should you need to make any tweaks or any fine-tuning, this is where you can control how much that light map is being utilized.
Exactly. And if you get to the point where you're bringing in your own light maps, you can actually drag your own light maps, give them an index, and this is where you would go if you want to assign a light map by hand to that object and its position in that light map's UV space.
Gotcha. Now let's select a light. I'll just go ahead and grab our key light back here, and our object panel is going to change. Now what kind of things are we seeing here?
Well, a lot of the stuff that you see here is actually replicated in the inspector, or replicated from the inspector. If you look at the color intensity, these are the same parameters that you'll find inside of the inspector.
And adjusting one will adjust the other.
Exactly. If you look at the light mapping at the very top, it actually has three settings, which is also comparable to the light mapping down inside of the inspector. Now what this parameter does is determine when and where these light maps are going to show up in a light map, if at all. If you set it to real time only, this light will not get baked out when you bake out light maps. It will only show up while running the game.
Which would be important for a dynamic light, and by dynamic I mean a light that could move or change in some way. I mean,
right,
maybe
the headlights of a car.
Sure. Or like maybe a light that's going to be flickering on and off or changing color at some point, because any change to the light, you would need that to update within the light map, and of course that's counter to the very idea of light maps where you have pre-calculated lighting information.
Right.
So as soon as that light needs to change during runtime, it really needs to be a real-time only light.
Right. Conversely, we have baked only. Now, baked only would be used for lights that are not changing and don't really need to cast light or shadows.
Yeah, it's as long as you don't really have to have a shadow. A really good example would be maybe if you had some decorative lighting that was all around maybe the upper fringes of a room. Say you've got, I don't know, I keep picturing like a movie theater. When they bring the lights up, they've got little lights all along the ceiling sometimes that look really nice, but you're never going to pass anything in front of those that's going to need to cast a shadow. However, you need that lighting information to be there to set the ambiance of your level. If you set those to baked only, they can be baked right into the light map. Then when all that baking is done, kill those lights out altogether so they're no longer being calculated and the lighting information will remain.
Well, the nice thing with a map that's set, or a light that's set to baked only, you don't even have to go back and kill them. They will automatically not show up when you're running your game. They're already off.
Awesome. And of course, our third setting is auto.
And that allows the Unity engine to make the determination if these lights need to show up in the light map, or if they need to show up when you're actually running your game.
And that's going to be based on
again, your proximity to that light and the intensity, again, similar to the other setting that we discussed in previous videos over lighting.
All right, now down from here we have our bounce intensity. And what's this going to do for us?
Well, it's going to basically determine how much of that light is going to carry on through bounce after it bounces off of
kind of like energy
objects.
Conservation?
Similar, yes.
So if we pull this down to a value underneath 1, then each time the light bounces, we're actually getting less and less light as we go, which can lead to more realistic bouncing. Down we have our baked shadows. Now, this is analogous to the shadow type settings over here inside the inspector. So if I set this to off, you'll notice our shadows switch off. And by setting this to off, we are not going to bake shadows from this light.
Correct.
They just simply won't be calculated. Then we can switch this to on, and the real-time version will be for hard shadows, or on, and the real-time version will be for soft shadows. Now, as soon as we turn on shadows, we have two properties inside here. We have our shadow samples and our radius.
Right.
What are these going to do for us?
Well, like you were mentioning before, the baked shadows, real-time soft shadows, real-time hard shadows are going to render in our light maps the same. And whether or not those shadows are going to be hard or softer is going to be dependent on our shadow radius. Our shadow samples is a quality factor. The higher this number is, the more rays it's using to calculate the quality of the shadow. Our shadow radius is a blend at the edge of the shadows to determine how soft those are going to get.
All right. Now, we've taken a look at regular objects, we've taken a look at lights, but there's one more thing we really need to show off here, and that is if you have a terrain selected, because terrains are kind of a special case. So I'm going to create a terrain. Even though we won't really be able to see it, we can select it, and it will pop up here in the object panel. And it has some of its own settings, though the one that really stands out is our light map size. Now, why is this different than what we had before?
Well, a terrain is going to get its own light map regardless. It's not going to be sharing its UV space with any other object. So when you have a terrain in your scene, it gets its own light map, and the size of that light map is going to be determined by this value.
Gotcha. Which that'll of course control the overall quality of that light map. If we click on this, we can set it all the way down to 0 or as high as 4096.
Right. And with everything that you're going to find in this panel, a golden rule is the higher that number is, the slower your bakes are going to take.
Gotcha.
Or the longer they're going to take, the slower they're going to be.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So just be really careful of that. Also, in this case, I mean, you are establishing a 4096 by 4096 texture,
which can be a limiting factor depending on what platform you're planning on exporting your game to.
Right.
You're not going to be putting that on mobile.
Using.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so that is a quick look at the object panel here inside our light mapping window. That's going to wrap things up for this video. Thanks for watching.